Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maleary and this is X Job Downloaded. Today it's my intention to interview Richie Lague. Correct pronunciation?
That is, yeah. Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
I would imagine that's French. Do you know the origins of the name?
Yeah, it dates back to the something to do with the Huguenots.
Huguenots.
Yeah.
No, that's a subject I've absolutely no idea, other than the fact that they moved into the East End of London and they were residents of Whitechapel and the Brick Lane area.
Ah, I didn't know that.
There you go.
Yeah,
So that's
new for me as well.
I like my East London history, but yeah, that's a fact. They actually resided in that area. Completely different world now. Welcome, Richie, to X Job Downloaded today. Now, you've had an interesting life. You've done. I really should title this the reluctant police officer because you were in the police, but you weren't in there for very long. It's fair to say. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from originally?
So from a small town in North East Essex called Brightlingsea.
Brightlingsea. I know Brightlingsea.
Oh, yes. Yes, and it was certainly put on the map with the live animal exports back in 1994.
Yeah, it was 94.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great place. In fact, I used to live just up the road from Brightlingsea. My parents, when they first got married, they lived in a accommodation there. My dad was in the army in Colchester, and they couldn't get an army property there, so they rented in Brightlingsea. So I know it well.
Yeah.
What year were you born?
75.
75, the year West Ham won the FA Cup. So that's a big year for me. May 1975, we won the FA Cup. And your normal childhood in Brightlingsea, I suppose?
Yeah, indeed. Well, as normal as it gets in Brightlingsea.
Mate, there are worse places in the world. I love it down there. So you go through your normal schooling, secondary school. Did you go to grammar or you?
No. So I completed my schooling at the Colne High School in Brightlingsea, and I did a year of sixth form. So I did a year of A-levels, but decided it wasn't for me and wanted to go out and earn a crust and get a motorbike and a drum kit and so on. So
how did you get a drum kit on your motorbike?
with difficulty. So I left sixth form after a year and went and did a 4-year engineering apprenticeship at a place called Woods of Colchester, an old GEC company. So, I trained to become a mechanical and production engineer.
And they had the best social club in Colchester.
They did indeed, yeah. Woodwood Social Club.
I saw some great bands there.
Well, the likes of Queen played there back in the day.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, absolutely. And that's all houses now.
Yeah, that's right.
But I saw some absolutely fantastic bands there. It was a brilliant night out. But sadly, it's all gone. So you did your apprenticeship.
Yeah, did my apprenticeship, so 4 years, and that was day release to Colchester Institute, so day release and night school as well. Got my papers, so got my ONC, HNC in Mech and Prod Engineering, and then I went on to get into sales engineering. So went out on the road repping for a while.
Oh, okay.
So and I was did that for several years, selling bearings and power transmission of all things.
Wow.
Yawn.
But there's a market for everything in this world. And Woods were a huge producer of that type of thing, and they were a big employer in Colchester. In fact, there were a number of engineering companies back in the day, which, of course, everything's gone overseas now, but that's another story. So was it whilst you were repping and sales that you thought, do you know what, I might go and do something completely different?
Yeah, so how the story goes is I got to around 25, I think it was, so 2000, and I actually thought I wanted to join the RAF. So I applied for a commission, and I went through all the process, which was about a year from start to finish, from walking into the careers office in Southend to going to the Officer and Aircrew Selection Centre at RAF Cranwell in Lincolnshire, and undergoing all the aptitude tests and so on, to then be told that I hadn't been successful, which was okay. You know, and hindsight's a great thing. I think it was probably a good thing. And actually, what it did make me laugh. One of the bits of feedback was from the interview panel was, lacks a bit of polish, apparently. So right? Yeah. Apparently, I can't deny that. There's a bit of the older Essex geezer comes in now and then.
Yeah,
so
there's nothing wrong with that.
So I applied for that, and also another piece of feedback was that I didn't have much in the way of uniformed experience or team working experience. So what happened was I took that on the chin and thought, right, okay, what have I got to do to improve my chances of obtaining that commission? So I joined the Auxiliary Air Force. I joined 2623 Squadron at RAF Honington, which is a regiment. So, my title was gunner there, albeit I only did that for around a year, because what I realised during that time was that that wasn't quite what I was looking for, fortunately. But during that time, I got friends with an officer who was in Special Branch, and he sort of suggested to me, if you're not going for the RAF.
Special Branch in Essex?
Yeah.
Who was that?
Yeah, Lee Newton.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. He got the MBE, didn't he, or something similar to
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did,
So he suggested, he said, well, why not think about the job? Because he said, it's best of both worlds. You get the uniformed service, you get the institution, and this, that, the other, but also you're on Civvy Street still. So he then put me in touch with Ian Logan at Colchester, and I did some work shadowing. So I went out on a couple of shifts.
Nice man.
Yeah, good guy. And he also introduced me to Steve Hutley as well on the dog section.
Well, we've done a podcast with Steve, and if you listen to the very first podcast that we did, it features Steve and his exploits in the Falkland Islands.
Yes, that's yeah. So I actually went out on a couple of shifts with Steve as well, and formed a friendship with him. And
he's a good guy.
Salt of the earth. And off the back of that, I applied to Essex and ended up joining in May 2002.
Oh, okay. And where did you? I suppose you went to Ashford to start off with.
I did, yeah. One of the last lot to go to Ashford, actually, before it all became centralised. Yeah, and actually, I was in the last lot of probationers to go down there. To be wearing the blue shirts as PC.
Oh, really?
And actually, we had to change over to the white shirts while we were down there. Yeah.
I miss the old blue shirts, and the reason I miss them is because you could spot a governor a mile away.
Exactly.
If all the PCs and sergeants are wearing blue, when a governor came walking through in a white shirt, you knew exactly that was going to be an inspector or above.
Yep, definitely.
But they then give us those white shirts, and then they give us black shirts, and I was absolutely against that, but that's another story. So you're at Ashford. How was your experience there? What was that like?
Oh, I absolutely loved it.
Did you?
Yeah, really thrived on it. Well, I never went to university, so it for me it fell almost like being at uni, albeit for a much shorter time. But we had quite a different experience in my class compared to others because there were so many officers on the intake. There wasn't enough accommodation on site.
Oh.
So a number of us were staying at Y College, just down the road, which I think was an agricultural college.
Right.
And because it was, by the time we got there, it was sort of July time, I think. All the students who would normally be there were off on their summer holidays. So we got the benefit of being able to get off the site and almost like go home for the night each night. And then, come back each day for the day stuff. So, and I think that did make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more of a grown-up sort of experience. I loved Ashford. I was 21 years old when I went there. We got snowed in. It was absolutely superb. It was, the food was dire, but the actual experience itself, I absolutely loved it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's where your characters are built, and unfortunately, it's all done in-house at the headquarters now, and
yeah.
They can't have those laughs that we had. And I suppose some of them were inappropriate, but do you know what? It was a bloody laugh. So you pass out at Ashford.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go to as your first posting?
So I got posted to Colchester Division.
And you're a Brightlingsea resident, so that makes it quite, not awkward, but you would know people in the town, and working in Woods, you know the area well.
Yeah. But that was also a benefit because, also having been a rep in the area, my geographical knowledge was pretty good as well. So that certainly helped.
And you went on shift there?
Yeah, I was on sea shift response for first 2 years, and then at the end of my probation, I transferred to the North Community Police team.
Okay.
And I inherited St Anne's Ward, which is also known as White City in Colchester.
Oh, okay, yeah, the salt of the earth area. I mean, it's, for those listening, White City is a former, they're all council homes. They were built as council homes. And I had a lot of experiences there when I was on major crime. Mm-hmm. Interesting enough, we had a fatal fire up there. There was a number of things that took place up there which were pretty sad. I don't think we ever found the person responsible for that. But yeah, it's got its downside, but there's a lot of positives there as well. There's a lot of really good people that live in this enclave. But yeah, so you were up there.
Yeah, and I mean at the time it was in the top 13 most deprived wards in the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that Greenstead was worse than St Anne's or White City, but actually it wasn't, because it had more of an infrastructure. It had community, it had community centres, it had shops and all sorts, whereas St Anne's had nothing.
And I vividly remember you'd go into a house and there'd be no wooden doors because the doors would have been chopped up and put on the fire.
Mm. Yeah.
Everything was, you had metal doors, you had metal railings outside the houses because the fences went the same way because people couldn't afford to buy their fuel.
Yeah.
It is very, very socially deprived, and but as I say, there's some great people that lived up there, real characters.
Yeah, and I mean the biggest thing at the hub of it was the primary school right in the centre, which at the time had gone into special measures, but we were able to use that to our advantage because the new head that came in asked us if there was anything she could do to help with policing the area. And we'd identified that quite often if there was crime committed, the offenders would run through properties out the back gardens across the school field, and then they could appear anywhere else in any of the other properties as well. So I, tongue-in-cheek, said to her, "How about a 7-foot tall security fence around your school playing field?" And you know what? She got it.
Did she?
She got it put in. Yeah,
Wow.
which really helped. But we did other things as well to try and sort of familiarise and desensitise the younger population. The up and coming generation, really, at primary school age, that the police were okay.
Yeah.
So, I got involved with going to open days there, and so they could crawl all over the car and, hopefully not strip it of the wheels and everything.
It used to frustrate the life out of me as a uniform officer. I'd walk around and people say, "Oh, there he is, he'll take you away if you..." And you don't want kids to be in fear of the old Bill. At the end of the day, you want them to have a warm feeling if they are in problems, if they've got any issues at all, that they can walk up to a police officer and say, "I've got a problem." But when the parents do that, it really used to irk me. But anyway, that's how it is. Hopefully there's people out there walking and they have the same interactions, but who knows?
Yeah.
What were the highlights of working in Colchester?
Well, one of the highlights for me, in particular, was that transition from response across to community policing, because it felt more like a proactive move. You didn't feel like you were sort of firefighting all the time and just chasing your tail. So you could get down there grassroots level and actually see what was going on and do some preemptive stuff. And that for me felt a lot more positive.
Yeah.
And getting in with like the residents associations and stuff and doing some relationship building. So around that time, that was 2004. ASBOs were hot topics, and
you'd have had a lot up there.
Yeah.
Antisocial behaviour orders.
That's right. Yeah, and I was instrumental in applying for some of those, and I was also the first officer on division to secure a dispersal order for the division.
Oh, okay.
And that was on St Anne's, so that enabled us to disperse groups of 2 or more people when there was
stop them congregating. And
that's right.
I think that particular area, and there's a number of them in the UK, where the kids are, how should we say it? They're dismissed before they've even started. They don't get a chance, and it's they get told. Well, I don't even think they get told. I think it's almost the discrimination against them is subtle. The schools try and help them, but society at large, if an employer, if a kid walks in and gives a particular address, the kid's already dismissed from that process because of where they come from. I think, anyway. I think that's and it's pretty unfair.
Quite possibly. Yeah.
So how long were you the community officer for St Anne's?
Probably around about 18 months, I think it was, or so. And then my sort of final posting, if you like, was over towards Copford with Sergeant Matty Garrett.
Sergeant Matty Garrett. Copford. So when I was a kid, the police, where the police station is, you've got the police houses on the left-hand side as you face the station.
Yeah.
We lived in those police houses. When my dad came out of the army, that his first posting was Colchester, and we lived in the police houses. And next door to us was a lovely man called Eric Cayley, who was a former paratrooper. And years afterwards, we discovered that his wife was from Pakistan, which is, Dolly, she was absolutely lovely. But yeah, so I know that area. And here's another one for you: the A12 came past the front door because the A12 wasn't built then.
Oh wow, blimey! Yeah.
Yeah, so the bypass. Yeah, so I know that well. So you're at Copford. I mean, you've gone into a completely different stream of policing now.
Yeah. I mean, and that was a bit more. Well, it felt a lot more sleepy, to be honest, compared to White City. Yeah, so that was more like your theft of hanging baskets sort of thing. But,
different clientele, but still demanding for what they want. They still want their police service. I mean, Colchester's always. You think about it, it's a city now, which I still can't get my head around. It used to be the oldest recorded town, and now it's the oldest recorded city. But anyway, and it's a mixture of military, students, and the general populace, but they've still got great values, and there's still a great rapport with the police, and a long way to continue.
Yeah.
So, what was the highlight of working in the rurals, apart from working with Matt Garrett, of course?
I think if anything, it's probably a double-edged sword. Really, it was quiet, which. In some ways wasn't so great because you need something to keep you ticking over. Yeah. But that was also one of the bonuses as well, that it wasn't
Well, you weren't flat out all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, that was.
Was it there that you decided that you were going to make the transition out of the police service?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Do you think if you'd have gone to a different location, a different police station, you'd have stayed in there, or had you just had enough?
No, I think I'd just got to the point where I'd had enough. I think subconsciously, I think I'd always wanted to try and prove to myself and everyone else that I could be this upstanding pillar of society and hold down a responsible job, because I'd always been a bit footloose and fancy free and a bit wayward. And I think part of me felt that I'd achieved that. And the other thing that came out was that as part of the nature of the work, I discovered that I had some mental illness which hadn't been looked into or discovered beforehand.
Right, okay.
So I had some issues with anxiety and depression, and what really helped was the fact that I was able to access some counselling for the first time in my life, and
within the police service.
Yeah. Oh, well, not. It was organised within the police, but independent.
What was the? If you don't want to answer this, I won't be offended. But what was the trigger that made you realise that your mental health wasn't as good as it probably could have been?
Good question. Well presented. I think I noticed in myself that my mood wasn't where it used to be, and that there was a big change in my personality within myself. I think maybe an element of vicarious trauma as well. I was very much, like I say, I used to be very sort of footloose and fancy free. And what I noticed, and what my friends noticed who weren't in the job, that they all sort of saw that I'd become incredibly serious and untrusting, and had lost a bit of that sort of spark and zest for life, really. So yeah, and
were there experiences in the police service that you, and I don't want to drag this up, but that you experienced that may have triggered some of that? You say vicarious trauma, but we as a collective deal with fatal road collisions, sudden infant death, things like that, and they do sit in your subconscious. Whatever you think about that, they sit with you. We've all got our different ways of dealing with those images in our photographic memories. But was there anything like that you can sort of put your finger on and say, actually, that's what made the difference, or was it just a collective of issues?
I think there was. There was a collective of issues, but there was one particular incident which really sort of stuck in my mind, and I wasn't really happy about how it had been dealt with by the organisation. Right. And I just thought, what am I doing, and what is this all about? And it really made me sort of
Can you tell us what that is, or you'd rather not say?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I mean, I was first on the scene to what had been called in as a hit and run, and got to the scene. I was tasked with doing some house to house, which was in town centre in Colchester. So I went into a pub to see if they had any CCTV. By which point the victim had been conveyed off up to hospital. So it's all being treated as hit and run at that time.
Struck by a car, and the car's left the scene.
Yeah, indeed. Until I'm then sat with the manager of this pub, looking at the CCTV, and we see that this guy's frog marched up this road, where he's then hit over the back of the head with a champagne bottle, and numerous guys then go up and took running kicks at his head. Oh. And then became a very different story. Yeah. To then get the call come through from ambulance that the victim had then passed away. So
that's a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So from being on a half night, just to be on patrol around the town and being on a rest break, to be called out to first on the scene to a hit and run, to suddenly it changing to that was a massive game changer.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And I felt like I was the catalyst throughout that whole event, because I was then having to go down to the public CCTV place at the time and review that, and there were officers saying, "Oh, I know that's so and so. That's so and so who did it. He was in town earlier," and I was saying, "No, it's not him. I can assure you it wasn't him, because I saw him earlier and he couldn't even stand."
Yeah.
And he was being like led away.
He'd been made public enemy number one.
Yeah. And he was nicked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I really disagreed with that. And I thought, you're not listening to what I'm saying here. This guy had his arms around two guys and his feet dragging behind him. He wasn't capable of standing up, let alone going to do that.
And that undermines your value as you feel that, when people don't listen to you, and I'm cutting in, so I am listening to you, but you feel that your position's been undermined, don't you?
Yes. When
people go against you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was the outcome? Did they actually find the person responsible?
They found the people, but I don't know what the outcome was in the end. No. As a result of that particular incident, within a few days, I ended up going off sick.
Did you?
Yeah. It ended up being like a 16-hour shift or something for me, and it was a bit too much for me to deal with, and there was no critical incident debrief or anything for me, and I was just kind of left holding the baby, so to speak.
Yeah. And it is hard. I mean, I witnessed somebody. In fact, I was at Ashford, and I'd come home it was New Year's Eve at the Tartan House, which was up at Freighting.
Yeah.
And as I walked out, a member of the public walked into the path of a car and was killed on the spot. And I saw it all happen in front of me. Yeah, and that was 30. Well, I joined December 86, so that's it's 37 years. No, not that, is it? 37 years ago. Yeah, nearly 37 years ago. But I still remember it.
Yeah.
And that does. All these different things, they do build up in your pot of rubbish, if you like, and then it all amalgamates, and then it causes you issues. So you've gone off sick. Is that when you got posted to Cotford when you came back from your sickness?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you're disaffected, effectively disaffected by the police, and you think, well, do you know what? I'm going to go and do something completely different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's a really brave move. And if there's anyone listening to this, hopefully they'll take heart in the fact that you can do it.
Yeah.
Because I think I became institutionalised. I love the police. I'm really, really proud and passionate about it. But it is an institution. Mm-hmm. And, as I say, it affects people in different ways. But, I think you're very brave to have made the step out. So you stepped outside. What was that like, handing your warrant card back, and how did you feel?
But firstly, thank you for praising me for saying that. Yeah, that's kind of you to say that. I appreciate that, because it was a big step. It was a massive decision to make, and I felt like it was the only decision I could make. It was. I had a bit, quite a bit of ambivalence about it. Really, part of me was worried and frightened about what the future held. The other part of me was massively relieved that all that responsibility had then suddenly gone. But there was a sense of loss of losing that comradeship.
Yeah.
But it was the right decision for me, and I think also having spent some time at the police rehabilitation place, Goring, Flint House as it's known.
Yeah.
That opened my eyes up to a number of other stories that other officers had told me about their experiences in the police, their experiences with mental illness, and also maybe how they'd been dealt with by their particular organisations. And there were certain particular stories that really stuck in my mind, and I thought, yeah, actually, the police is always going to be here, whereas I'm not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was scary walking away. However, I mean, I didn't join till I was 27, so I'd already had a bit of life experience under my belt, and I already knew that I could turn my hand to most things, and that there was life beyond the job, and I'd not paid so much into the pension to then feel like I was stuck in it.
Yeah.
And and there were people saying to me, "Oh, Richie, if I didn't have 10 years paid into the pension, I'd be out by now." And I thought, you know what, I've just got to do it. And it used to be that the job was for life. And I thought, no, there is only one me, and I need to do what's right for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't regret the service that I did. I don't regret anything that happened within the job. If anything, I'm grateful for it, because it opened up this Pandora's box of looking into my own mental illness and insight and so on. I very much consider that all things happen for a reason in life, and a lot of the jobs that I did beforehand all kind of complemented the way and helped me get into the police. For example, like my sorry, I'm going off the
No. Listen, this is fascinating. So please carry on.
So, for example, you probably won't find many Commonwealth Garden PCs saying they enjoy interviewing. Most of them enjoyed being out and about on the street, thief taking. Whereas having been trained in sales and spent a number of years out on the road, meeting people I've never met before and interviewing them, asking various open and closed questions, and I will say it's manipulative, because it is.
Yeah, of course it is.
It's because you're there to try and sell. You're there to try and persuade them around to your ideas. But that helped in particular with my interviewing technique and the peace training model and so on. So I particularly loved doing interviewing, because it was a good way to actually not just look at the crime itself, but actually, right, okay, what's actually gone on here? What's going on for the person in their mind? Why have they done it? All the mens rea and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That fascinated me. And also there's that game playing with the solicitors and that as well. And I actually absolutely loved no comment interviews as well. A lot of people hated them, but I loved them because I knew the ins and outs of pace and firing the special warnings and so on. And just brilliant.
And it is. I mean, obviously doing this, I like interview, but people like people. And I've interviewed a number of murderers, and whilst I don't like what they did, I found them fascinating individuals. And as you say, even if they make no comment, that's not a personal thing. That's the advice that they're given. The law of the land allows it. But they're interesting people, and if you can just delve into that, it really is fascinating. People are fascinating, and that's why we do X Job Downloaded. When you've walked away, you've handed over your warrant card, and you just go back to Flint House. I have to say, Flint House do a fantastic job with police officers, and they help you identify your inner self. Yeah. Sometimes police forces don't want that to happen, because actually there's an attrition of staff that leave, but I also need to make it clear that it's something that's paid for by the police. It's not publicly funded. We all paid into Flint House and subscribed to it.
Yeah, via the benevolent fund, wasn't it?
Yeah, benevolent fund. That's it. So you've now walked away from the police. Your warrant card's gone back. That bit of plastic that used to get you on the tubes and save your life. And it did, genuinely, that little bit of plastic, that was the only thing. If you produced that and somebody was kicking off, that would 9 times out of 10, that would pacify somebody. They'd think twice about striking. They did then. I don't know what it's like now. They'd think twice about striking a police officer. Yeah, the one person that's going to do it, they're always going to do it. But you've handed that all back. Okay. Yep. What did Richie do next?
Well, I actually went and worked for a friend of mine. So I went back into sales because it was what I knew, albeit in a totally different industry. So I went and worked for a friend of mine selling luxury log cabins and mobile homes.
Well, there you go. They're very similar, aren't they?
But I mean, that wasn't really by choice. That was more a case of needing to have something to go to when I left, and him kind of helping me out, and me knowing that I could do sales. But the sort of game plan I had whilst I was in the police was that I'd realised that I preferred the more empathic side of helping people and listening to people and victim care and that sort of thing, rather than the thief taking. So whilst I was in the police, it kind of made me think, well, actually, what about, health and social care, that sort of thing? Maybe I'd be more attuned to that. Because, during those 4 years, not once did I use my ASP, not once did I use my gas. I just used my mouth.
Yeah.
Which to me was the best way in terms of conflict resolution. And I thought, well, actually, perhaps my skills would be better suited to somewhere else. And it wasn't until a few years later that I managed to break into that sort of sector.
Oh, really?
So I left the police in 2006, and it wasn't until 2010 that I managed to get into that sort of sector, because it's not easy to get into.
And what side of that did you get into?
So I became a independent mental health advocate and I was living in Suffolk at the time. So I used to go into acute psychiatric hospitals, which people will know as where people are sectioned.
Yeah.
So
136 of the Mental Health Act.
That's it. Yeah, or 2 or 3 if they're that involved going into hospitals and where people have been sectioned because they were deemed to be at risk of significant harm to themselves or others. Yeah. But due to their mental disorder, and I would go in and support them to get their voices heard, and that could be I'd sit with them at a ward round, which could be asking for basic things that they didn't feel able to voice themselves to staff, at their CPA, which is care program approach meetings, which is all about how their care package is coordinated and what they do on a day-to-day basis, what their aftercare is going to look like, and so on. And also I'd sit with them on mental health review tribunals as well to try and get their sections overturned.
Oh, okay.
But it was an interesting role because it wasn't there was no advice given. So as an advocate, it's quite an unusual role in that you're going in, you're identifying what the problem is, and then you're exploring options, and then you're exploring those options with your client, i.e. the pros and cons, and then you're empowering them to make a decision. And whatever decision they make, you then support them with. And it could be that decision you think is totally wrong and you think is an unwise decision, but that's not what you're there for. You're there to support that person, right, so that they feel in charge of their own destiny. Yeah.
That's interesting because, bear in mind you disclosed earlier on that you suffer with your own mental health. Mm-hmm. How was that going into a psychiatric unit that with people with acute issues? How was that for you?
It was interesting. How else could I put it?
Did you see any correlation between you and them? Was there that? The empathetic side is obviously there, but did you see that there was, a commonality between you and the people that you were visiting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I could see that, and I was always thinking, crikey, I could just be, one step away from being sectioned at any time myself if my mental illness took a turn for the worse at any time. Yeah. And I actually thought, well, I'd been very fortunate up until that time to have not been sectioned myself.
Right, okay.
Because I saw both the good points and the not so good points about what comes with that.
Yeah.
But in a kind of selfish way, it also made me incredibly grateful that my mental illness had never been that bad,
right,
for me to warrant being sectioned. So that was kind of a blessing in disguise as well.
Yeah. And what sort of experiences? I mean, I've been into psychiatric units. I had a colleague who discharged a CS spray in a mental health unit in Harlow, and it went through the air conditioning, and it literally, everybody had to go up there and pick up the pieces, literally, where someone had been extra violent. Mm-hmm. Did you experience it? Because there is an unpredictability around some of the people that reside there.
Yeah.
Did you experience some of that?
Not in that particular unit. I did in another unit, which was low secure hospital. So low secure for people with comorbid learning disabilities or autism with mental illness as well.
Right.
Normally with a forensic background. So they could have been sex offenders, for example, on Section 3741. Sections of the Mental Health Act, which are sections used by the legal system, so imposed by the courts.
Oh, okay, yeah. Detained at His Majesty's pleasure, and
yeah. So they're in a low secure hospital as opposed to prison, because they're deemed to be ill rather than criminally culpable.
Right. Yeah.
So I certainly saw more violence there, but never aimed at me. But those sort of locations and environments were quite intimidating, for sure. And you're on a heightened state of alert all the time, because you just didn't know what was going to happen next, and having to sit in padded rooms and so on, and making sure that you were sat near the exits and had a panic alarm with you, and so on and so forth. It was that was quite triggering, actually. Yeah, when I look back on that. But again, rewarding and fascinating to see how people's minds work.
And the staff within those units do a fantastic job, and they have to put up with an awful lot. You know, I used to sit on the board at Harlow with the community mental health team, and they really had some difficult characters to deal with.
Yeah,
and they have to go through an awful lot. The only thing I found really difficult is that the staff would wear normal clothes, and the people that resided there. And when I first went there, I was like, should you be going out that front? Yeah, should you be going out that front door? But anyway, we digress. How long were you doing that particular role for?
So that was on a fixed term contract, so I was doing that for a year, and then I moved on to another advocacy position, which was at that same low secure hospital. But also it was sort of dual role. I used to do NHS complaints, advocacy as well.
Right.
So both parts of that role were particularly busy.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
Not overly.
No. Well, look, your honesty is overwhelming, and as I said to you before, if you don't like something, you're clearly one of these people that will make the change. Mm-hmm. You won't wait for the change to make its mind up for you. You will make the change.
Yeah.
So where did you go to from there?
So from there, I went to adult social care for Suffolk County Council, and I was a community care practitioner with the specialist East Dementia cluster, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
So I specialised in moderate to advanced dementia for 2.5 years.
Well, my hat goes off to you, mate.
Thank you.
My mother-in-law's got dementia, and she's now in a home, and I tell you, it's heartbreaking. It is the disease that nobody wants. I've got friends that have been diagnosed with it, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. So well done, mate.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, another eye-opening experience. Interestingly, what I've tended to do throughout my the sort of later part of my life is push myself into areas which have frightened me, just to push myself out of my comfort zone and to continue that learning. So when I was a mental health advocate to start with, I was a bit wary of the people with dementia, and it was nothing to do. There was no sort of discrimination on my part in terms of anybody having a dementia. It was all my ignorance around lack of understanding.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it, so I was scared of it, and saw all this behaviour and was like, "Oh, that looks scary. I don't want anything to do with that." And I ended up thinking, well, actually, the only way I'm going to overcome that is to push myself into it. Get out of your comfort zone, Rich. Go and do something about it. So that's why the dementia role really appealed to me in Suffolk County Council. And interestingly, while I was doing that, we used to work quite closely with the other teams as well. And there was another team that specialised in learning disability and autism, and they used to speak quite a lot about their experiences. And again, I was like, "Oh no, I don't like the sound of that. No. That sounds really challenging." And I don't. And again, it was like, because I didn't understand it, so I pushed myself to then go and work in learning disability and autism as well. Good. So like I say, all these things have had a subsequent natural, organic sort of outcome, really.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we've gone through that. We've done the autism and special needs element as well. What happens next?
Oh crikey! Where are we up to? Oh, you'll like this. The total change.
Go on then.
So then one of the issues with these types of jobs in the voluntary sector is that they are all dependent on funding.
Of course they are. Because
a lot of them are run by charities. So a lot of them are fixed term contracts. So, a year's fixed term contract is great, but towards the end of that year, so 8-9 months, you've got one eye on the horizon already, just in case that funding isn't there again.
Yeah.
So, in the advocacy role where I was supporting people with learning dis and autism, that role came to an end and I didn't have anything to go to, so I found myself out of work, and came across a bit of a flat period in my mental illness again because of not having anything to go to, and a friend of mine suggested that I go and do some bits for another one of his pals, which was in building and construction. So I went and did some labouring because I thought, well, I'm not proud. I can turn my hand to most things. I need the money. I've got a daughter to support. I've got bills to pay.
Yeah.
So I went and did that temporarily. And
but how was your mental health at this time? I mean, it's about feeling valued. And when you become unemployed, you don't feel valued. How was your overall mental health? Oh,
it was pretty much rock bottom. When you're quite sedentary and you can't see the point of anything, and it's difficult to get out of bed, let alone get out of the house, and so on. So it was a real blessing in disguise for my friends to sort of come round and say, "Look, what about this, Rich?" And actually, it was a godsend because doing something that was so practical took me out of my head stuff, and put me in a small team of other guys where there was a bit of banter and stuff as well. And we were away a lot, which was okay. And I ended up sort of doing a bit of project management instead, and becoming self-employed and stuff, and doing that for a bit for my pal. But again, things got on top of me a bit with being away so much, and I was also drinking a lot as well with the sort of nature of the work we were doing and the after hours socialising.
Excessively?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that really took off. And that came to an end.
Do you think that, have you got an addictive personality when it comes to that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back, I always have done. And, for anyone who's listening, addiction isn't just about the substance or whatever it is at the time. It can be drink, drugs, sex, gambling,
food, yeah,
tech. You know, it can be looking at your phone. It can be social media addiction or box set addiction. Where there's a dependency and where there's a reaching out and a craving to change however you're feeling at that time, and that feeling is so strong that you can't control it or feel you can't control it, then there are issues there. And so for me, the drink had always been that comforter of changing how I felt. And it wasn't until the end of 2016 that I realised I'd an issue with that, and got myself some help. And 6 years on,
you haven't had a drink since.
No.
And you said earlier on, we're all one step away from mental health issues, but we're all one drink away from alcoholism.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to sink into a bottle of scotch, and I remember a pathologist saying once that if you've got problems and you have a drink, all you're doing is preserving that problem. Because when you look at a post-mortem, for instance, the organs go into alcohol and they're preserved forever, and that's all alcohol does. It just preserves it for another day, and the problems never get dealt with. So you haven't had a drink for 6 years, which is fantastic. Well done, mate.
Thank you.
So where did we get to now? Where are we in our life?
So then I pushed myself. I saw a job come up in domestic abuse, but it was not a conventional role in domestic abuse because it was working with the perpetrators.
Wow.
Rather than the victims. So for me, with being ex-job, that was a massive challenge in terms of my thinking, having been on the other side and been arresting the perpetrators. So I went for the job because I thought, well, again, I want to push myself out my comfort zone, and there's always two sides to the story, or more sides to the story anyway. And I thought it would actually be really interesting to see what it's like from perpetrators' point of view and find out what goes on in their heads. So I then worked on a pilot program pilot project for 2 years called Drive. And I was employed by Relate, the family counselling people. So yes, I work with high-risk perpetrators of domestic abuse. So those are the ones who are most likely to either significantly harm or kill their partners.
That is fascinating.
And we focused on pro-social modelling, motivational interviewing, and behavioural change. So we used basic cognitive behavioural therapy models to try and get through to them and change how they thought. And you know what, I thought even if I just stopped maybe one assault against a partner, I thought that's enough for me during those 2 years.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And did you deal with both sexes, male and female, or was it predominantly men?
In theory, I could have done, but all of mine were men.
Right. Yeah.
And that statistically, they are more likely to be men. Yeah. But again, that was a fascinating role.
Yeah, I bet.
And a lot of these guys, you know what, they'd sometimes they'd sit down and they'd be in tears in front of you, and it would be because they'd never had the chance to actually tell their story, not their story from the perspective of whatever the incident or incidents had been, but nobody had ever sat down and listened to what happened to them
and why they were in that situation. Because I wonder, and this is my police head, I wonder how many of those have been the victim of violence in their own homes prior to getting involved in a serious relationship. So it could have been, the slipper from the mum, slipper from the dad, beaten up by a brother, whatever. And they're seeking their retribution in their partners because their partners are a soft touch by comparison. Because they couldn't fight back to those individuals, they're now fighting somebody that they profess to love.
Yeah, and in a funny way, they They do love them, but it's a sentimental love. It's attachment rather than love, and it's an unhealthy attachment, and it's because of primarily learnt behaviour from being a child.
Yeah,
and that could be either like as you say, witnessing abuse or experiencing it themselves, and looking at what they call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma, and so on. And some of these guys have had absolutely horrendous childhoods.
Oh yeah.
And you think, well, you didn't have a fighting chance anyway. You were going to turn out like this, because it's when a child grows up in an environment where somebody is knocking 7 barrels out of someone else, it's normalised. As distressing as it is, they think, oh, that's what you do. That's how men treat women. That's what you do.
Yeah.
So then that's what they go on to do.
Yeah.
Not all of them. That's a bit of a sweeping statement for me to say that, but
no, but I get it, because the abusers become the abused become the abusers, and like you say, it's learned behaviour, and it's really sad. And you just, it's happening in closed doors all across the land, but it's been happening forever.
Yeah.
This isn't a modern phenomena. But the fact is that the police service have now professionalised the way in which they deal with domestic abuse victims and offenders. Mm-hmm. And some people need help; they don't need arresting. But that's a different story. We went down in the police service of arresting every offender, and I think they still do it. But some people just need to have that breathing space, just to be put in a car, taken round to a friend's, or 30 miles away, so that they can build that fire gap. But of course, that fire gap sometimes comes via a court.
But that was one of the positive things about our role. I mean, we didn't have to have any, there didn't have to be any court orders in place for us to get involved or anything. It could be that they were just referred to us by a refuge or independent domestic violence advisor, or police, or whatever, and we could get involved and see what support they needed.
Did you go into custody suites, or was it post? Yeah,
we went into custody. We used to visit in prisons as well. We used to help get restraining orders. We would so we'd do all that behavioural change stuff, but we'd also support or disrupt as well. So if they engaged, we would support them. If they didn't engage, we would disrupt them.
Yeah, no.
And that could be background information, looking on their social media, and just finding out if they've got any other partners and that sort of thing, and that as well. So,
as I say, I think they're professionalised. The fact is that the families can go in if there's a new partner, or they can go in and ask that question, can't they? Are they known to you as being a domestic abuse suspect?
Yeah. People can apply under what's called Clare's Law to find out if a new partner has got any previous history of that sort of offending. So for a bit of peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And the police respond to that really quickly, and rightfully so. How long did you do that role for?
That was 2.5 years, I think it was, yeah.
And does that bring us up to where we are now? Or?
Not quite, no. No.
I'm not rushing you.
You're fine. How long have you got?
We haven't got into religion yet, have we?
So after that, I thought... so again, that was a fixed term contract, and that was coming to an end, and I thought, right, okay... Actually, I'd like a bit of a change, because that was quite an intense role, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And, so I decided I quite fancy doing something totally different again. And I went and trained to become a driving instructor.
Well, you can't get more different than that, can you?
Well, you say that, but you know what?
It's the same set of skills, though.
Yeah. You're sat there, you're listening to people, and it's not so much instructing now, it's more coaching. So instruction, there's the emphasis on tell. Whereas with coaching, what you're doing is you're questioning them to draw out from them what knowledge they already have, and then helping them to use that knowledge to formulate their own answers. There's quite a skill involved with that as well.
What was that like? I mean, I couldn't be. I'm not patient enough. I couldn't. I try and show someone how to swing a golf club, and I struggle with that. You know, what was that like to teach somebody to drive?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the job in itself was fine, but it was a franchise, and the franchise costs were quite high, and also the process to become qualified is incredibly difficult to qualify.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
And I suppose those hoops cost money along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, with all your training, it costs several thousand to do it. And so I passed my part one. There's 3 tests. So I passed my part 1 and my part 2 with flying colours, no problem at all. And then the third test, which is where you have to go out with a pupil, with the examiner sat in the back, and he watches you deliver a lesson.
Okay.
So you've got 40 minutes to showcase what you can do, which is easier said than done.
Yeah. And
I failed it, but by which time I'd already kind of thought, this isn't for me. So I packed that in and went back to health and social care, but in Essex.
Right.
Just for a short time. But it had all changed since I'd been with Suffolk County Council, and I found that very difficult transitioning back into that. And so I left there, and that was 2 days before COVID.
Oh, no.
So, so then I was out of work for a good year or so, I think it was.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, during that time I was looking around for work, and it was difficult. I was living with my parents at the time, who were both shielders, so I couldn't really go out and do my health and social care stuff because I'd have been too close to people to pass that stuff on. And I thought, well, I looked at my CV and I thought, what's missing? A lot of the jobs I wanted to do, you needed a degree, which I didn't have. So I then thought, well, the only way to change that is to get one. So I applied to Essex Uni and applied to do a BA in psychosocial and psychoanalytic studies, and received an unconditional offer, which I was elated about because I'd never thought I was good enough to go to uni. So as a mature in my 40s, I was quite proud of that.
Yeah, I bet.
So I secured my place, and then to be told that I wasn't eligible for funding because of my HNC I'd done in engineering 24 years before.
Oh no.
So it was like back to square one again. So back on the roller coaster of Richie's life,
Given with one hand, taken away with another.
Yeah, and so then I went and got a job with a brain injury charity. Doing
Headway?
Doing support work, and secured the job.
They are a great charity.
Yeah. And who's their patron? Tennant.
Oh, yeah, David Tennant.
He's their patron. Yeah. So anyway, I secured that job, and the interview I think was in the November, and I was due to start in the January. And as it happened, there was another massive lockdown over the Christmas, and all of the support centres and rehab places across Essex were closed down by the council. So I didn't even get to start that job.
Oh, what a shame.
So and then roll on again another few months, and I ended up working for the NHS. So in the community. So I was supporting people with learning dis and autism again in the community, and towards the end of that, which was September last year. So I did a year with them. Towards the end of that, I realised that I'd kind of had enough of being sat in front of a computer screen, because despite the hands-on type of role it was, there was also a tremendous amount of time spent typing up records and so on. And
it's not very glamorous, is it?
No, and it's tiring being sat in front of a screen, and I suppose I was experiencing a bit of existential angst and just thinking, what is this all about? You know, what's life about, and why am I here? And I kind of thought, I've done quite a bit of helping people, and is there something I can do to be a bit kinder to myself? And that's where the idea for my latest venture sort of came in.
Which is very good, I have to say. We've seen your work, and it's really cool. So tell us all about that, and then we're going to get on to the religion side.
Okay, so what I decided was that I needed more autonomy and flexibility in my life, and to work around some of my health issues, and also so that I could focus more on practical things rather than being in my head all the time. Because as much as I love helping vulnerable people, it's incredibly draining as well. And when you've got your own stuff to deal with, it can be quite overwhelming at times. So I thought, well, I need to do something that's more practical, but what can I do maybe that can combine the two? So I came up with the idea of being a gardener come handyman, and so self-employed. And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll retain my DBS check, so people can see that I'm clear in terms of criminal record. I can be trusted, and get the public liability insurance, which I've got, but also market myself as dementia friendly. Because one of the things that I saw when I worked in dementia was that a lot of these older people were being preyed upon by rogue traders,
absolutely,
cowboy traders. So either people coming around and overcharging for work, or maybe they'd go in and distraction burglaries.
Yeah.
Or they'd go in, and little old Doris would have 50 quid in their purse, and they're counting it out in front of them to pay them 30, and they're actually taking 40 or 50, so on and so forth. And I just thought, there's got to be something I can do that can combine this passion for helping people, provide a service, but also help people and look out for vulnerable people. So that's where the idea for this business came up, really. And also the fact that in terms of older people, social isolation it can be an absolute killer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I thought, if they've got somebody who's popping in just once a week to do their gardening, or do a couple of jobs here and there, then it's an extra pair of eyes on them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And happy to liaise with family just to say, I'm a bit worried about this, or a bit worried about that. So and so's acting a little bit strange. Maybe you want to go and get them tested for a UTI or something, because.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting, because I know that the UTI, I've had family members who've had UTI and urinary tract infection. Yep. And they've gone, absolutely, I mean, it's a terrible term, but they've gone doolally. They've started seeing things, they've started alleging that certain things have happened, and it's because they've had a waterworks infection.
Yep.
It's really bizarre how that impacts on people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, with that element of dehydration, they can have hallucinations and experience things that altered sort of states of consciousness almost in terms of what's going on for them isn't what's going on for us, and that can be really distressing for them. And it could be just a case of, right, okay, let's dip test Doris and see what comes back, and it might surprise them that they then need a short course of antibiotics and they're fine. Because the other thing is that gets mistaken for dementia as well. Yes, and also if they've got dementia and a UTI, it's a whole world of hell for them. With
which we've experienced within our family.
Yeah. When they have that on top of on top of the dementia, it's
and you're
horrendous.
Qualified to recognise this, aren't you? I mean, you've worked within this sphere, so you've worked with dementia patients, so you know what you're looking for. Whereas other people, and we've got some great gardeners on xjobservices.com, but they may not recognise the symptoms of dementia. It may be the case that you're dealing with somebody on a regular basis. You think, well, there's a change there.
Yeah.
You can then go back to the family member and say, just keep an eye, go and get a referral sorted out and what have you.
Yeah, sure. I have to be a bit careful when you say qualified. I've got a diploma in health and social care, but I'm not degree educated.
I will take back that. But your recognition of such issues is such that you can recommend.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, also, I had a guy I was doing some gardening for during the end of last year, and he told me that he was diabetic, and I saw that he was starting to look a bit wobbly while he was talking to me, and sort of sussed out he was starting to have a hypo. So it's like, right, okay, where's your glucose tablets? Let's go and get you sat down, and was able to help him like that. Another good thing is, one of my customers, he said, "Oh, well, I like it when you come around, Richie." He said, because it's the garden was my pride and joy. I can't get out there now because of my mobility. He said, so when you come, I like that I can trust you and I can come out whilst you're there. That if I do take a fall, I'm not expecting you to pick me up, but at least there's somebody who can get help.
Yeah,
and that's really nice because I set up a work platform and he comes and sits out on that sometimes, and we have a bit of a yarn, and he imparts some of his knowledge about some of the flowers and stuff like that, which is nice, and that's good. And I mean, another sort of benefit is that some people, when they find out that I used to work in dementia, will ask me certain things about it. And I'm able to say, well, did you know you're entitled to this? Or did you know you can have this assessment or that assessment? And I can start talking about, powers of attorney and best interest decision making and all that type of stuff as well. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said about it.
When you started your journey as a police officer, who would have thought you'd been doing what you're doing now? I mean, you've gone through a number of interesting roles. Mm-hmm. What's the name of your company? What do you?
So my company is called Privet Property, and I've come up with that name in terms of privet being like a privet hedge and property being like the housing type part of it. So privet being the gardening side and the property being the home repair. So privet property, garden care, home repair.
And we'll put all your social media links and everything on here. And you travel through Essex. Mm-hmm. You're based in South Woodham, but you've got quite a wide coverage. You'll go pretty much anywhere to work. Right. So, sir, you're a practicing Buddhist, aren't you? A religion that I know absolutely nothing about. So just treat me as a complete novice.
Okay, so my first encounter with Buddhism was probably actually when I was about 10. I was at a family friend's and with my parents for Christmas do, I think it was. And their eldest son, who was about 8 years older than me, he'd always been non-conventional. So, and I remember seeing his room, and he had these weird and wonderful things, and he had a clock which was powered by electrodes in potatoes or something like that.
Okay.
It was all stuff like that. I was quite intrigued, and so I found out he was into Buddhism, and not that really sort of inspired anything at the time, but that's my sort of first recollection of thinking, there's something a bit different out there. And then when I was 17, 18, so 30 years ago, a friend of mine used to go to meditation classes in Colchester, and all my pals used to mock him for it. And I thought, well, rather than acquiescing, I'm going to go and see for myself what it's all about. Yeah. And it was Buddhist meditation. And I went along and learnt the two main types of meditation that they do. And the order member there, his name was Harsha Prabha, that's his ordained name. And
do you have an ordained name?
No, I'm not ordained. No.
Okay.
Hakuna Matata.
There's no need to worry.
If we do this again in 8 years' time and that's my ordained name, that will be funny.
Yeah, we will come back and visit.
This guy was just the most chilled out guy I'd ever seen in my life. It was just like he was floating.
Right.
He was just so relaxed and peaceful and just his focus and his concentration, and it was just amazing. And there was just a lovely, calm, relaxed aura in the place. Like I say, I was 17, 18 at the time. So I went along a handful of times and thought, yeah, I like this. But the draw of sex, drugs and rock and roll sort of took over instead, really. And I was off playing with drums in bands and going out drinking and seeing girls and stuff. So, yeah, that was my first proper encounter with it, really. And then roll on many moons later into start of 2018, I had a health scare at the start of the year. So I went to have an ultrasound on my kidneys, and whilst I was having the ultrasound, they said, "Oh yeah, we've located the kidney stone. Oh, and the tumour's still there on your liver. The results will be through your doctor in da-da-da amount of weeks." And I was like, "Tumour?
What tumour?
What tumour? Oh, didn't you know? Yeah, no. Oh, right, okay, well, there is a tumour on your liver, and but we'll let the doctor talk to you about that."
So how long did they think that the tumour had been there then?
I don't know. They didn't.
It didn't allude to that bit.
Didn't allude to that or anything at the time. So I came out of there in a bit of a state, thinking that's it. And thinking, because of my history with the drinking, I thought, well, there's a bit of karma for you there, Rich. You've got yourself a tumour on your liver because of your drinking. But I sort of picked myself up, dusted myself down, and thought, well, it is what it is. I can't change it, so change how I think about it. So I went away and I thought, well, I can't do anything until I've got the formal results from the GP or consultant anyway. But also what had happened around that time, I'd lost a lot of weight. I'd lost like a couple of stone within a month and had major tiredness and a number of other worrying symptoms. Off the back of that, my sort of mood then plummeted because of that as well. And also, I'd just then convinced myself I was going to die.
Yeah, I get it.
And so I then thought, right, bucket list. So I got my bucket list out, and one of the things on there was to go to a Buddhist retreat.
Wow.
And I was living in Suffolk at the time, and I found a Buddhist retreat just outside of Bury St Edmunds called Vajrasana. And so I found that, and I booked up for a weekend. To go on my own. It was booked up through the London Buddhist Centre. So there was a coach load of 40 or 50 Buddhists from London going up there, and little me pitched up on my own, not knowing anyone, in a bit of a state, and just wanting to try and get some respite from the day-to-day life and what was going on in my head in terms of thinking I was going to die. So I went along to this retreat, and so that was a Friday afternoon through to a Sunday afternoon, and it was life changing. It was just amazing, just being around other people who were so calm and collected, peaceful, and who seemed to have some real substance about what they were talking about. There seemed to be a real authenticity about them, and nothing that they spoke about was superficial. It wasn't any of this, what's going on with the weather today and stuff. Yeah, there's a place for that, but no small talk. It was all in-depth stuff, and I thought, yeah, this is interesting actually. and I learned how to, picked up the meditations again from what I'd done 30 odd years before or whatever, and they came back very quickly, and very quickly I was able to go sort of inwards and focus on myself and develop that insight. And I took part in some of the rituals in the shrine room as well, and it was like the only way I can describe it is like it was like a coming home,
right?
Just something very in your heart centre. You can't even. It's really difficult to intellectualise it, and
but it made you feel really comfortable.
Yeah, there was just something very homely about it. And
what are the values of being a Buddhist? I mean, there's
crikey, where do you start? I mean, for instance, I've recently become a Buddhist mitra, and mitra in Sanskrit means friend, so friend of the order. And what that means is that I consider myself to be a Buddhist, and that I'm agreeing to try and live by the precepts. And we have 5 sort of precepts, which they're not like vows or anything like that. They're not rules. They're more like sort of guidelines to try and live your life by. And the basic sort of precepts that I live by are not causing harm to anyone or anything. So, for instance, I live on a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
I transit off the back of that retreat, that one weekend retreat in 2018, where it was a vegan diet for that weekend.
Yeah.
So as soon as I got back from that, I went vegetarian.
Right.
So that's how powerful this stuff is.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned to vegan in February this year. So I don't eat or drink.
You even brought your own Oatly milk today, didn't you?
I did indeed. Yes.
You knew that we were useless and we wouldn't remember. So I did remember actually, but I didn't go and get any. I apologise. So you're a vegan, plant, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
What are the other rules that you?
So not taken and not given, which isn't just like like that could be theft in its harshest term, but it can also be like not taking attention and things like that from where it's not given. It can be applied quite broadly,
right? And
all these things are on a sort of on a scale of and in Buddhism, we don't really think of the duality of good and bad, and that's one of the ways that it's different to other schools of thought and other religions, because actually, just picking up on something you said, you described it as a religion. But, if you're completing equalities monitoring forms and stuff like that, it will be listed as a bona fide religion, which I always tick.
Yeah.
However, you speak to any Buddhist, then they will actually say, well, it's not technically a religion, because most religions are based upon some form of supernatural deity. So gods and so on. So Buddhism, for example, isn't. It's based upon this one human being who was a prince. It's Prince Siddhartha Gautama, who was born around 2,500 years ago, and all the notions and concepts around it are all from him. So this was a living, breathing human who had some very, very forward-thinking ideas on how to live a sort of honest, genuine, peaceful,
congenial life,
ethical life. And that's one of the things that appealed to me about it. There's none of this, you're going to be cast down into Hades and this, that, and the other. There's none of that. So anyway, I digress. So, on the not causing harm, you've got the spectrum of, on the worst end, you've got killing. And then on the higher end, you've got, being positively, proactively kind to others. So, one of the things is about being generous.
Okay.
And generosity doesn't have to be in the form of finances and monetary gain and stuff. For me, I don't know if that's to give anyway. So, but what you will get from me as either a friend, family member, acquaintance, customer, whatever role, if you know me, I will give you my time.
Yeah.
And that to me is the most precious thing, because you can't get time back.
No, you can't. You're absolutely right.
So what I like to invest in people, because I am genuinely interested in people, and see their value, and like to harness their good qualities, really. So there's a couple of the precepts. Another one is what they call right speech. So it's about not lying, not being dishonest, and so on. And that can be even down to like white lies and stuff as well.
Really?
So it's about.
Are you having a nice time today?
I am indeed, and that is the truth. But I mean, a lot of that can be. Well, a lot of Buddhism is about self-development. So that can be about building your self-esteem and your assertiveness, so you actually feel confident enough to be able to speak the truth.
Right. That makes sense.
Even though it might not be what someone else wants to hear. So then that's about, well, actually, that's as long as that isn't causing harm. So you got to be a bit careful there. There's got to be a balance, but also there's something about not causing harm to yourself as well, and not just acquiescing with certain things and doing certain things just for the sake of it, when actually in your heart of hearts you may not believe in it or whatever. Yeah, so it's quite empowering. There's another precept which is about abstaining from or reducing the amount of intoxicants you have in your life. So drink, drugs, caffeine. I'll occasionally have caffeine. I think I've got caffeine today, haven't I, Paul?
I think you probably have. To be fair, my life is built around caffeine, I'm afraid. Cups of tea, but I apologise.
That's okay. No, it's fine. That's fine. And but I'm kind of already halfway there with some of the stuff, the self-development stuff, in terms of my recovery and my sobriety. So obviously, I don't touch drink at all, and it's not saying don't ever have a drink, but it's like, well, just be careful, because any of this stuff that you do, and if you breach any of these precepts, then what they do is what's going to happen is it's going to affect your whole being and how you are, how you present yourself, and how you interact with the world, and the sort of loving kindness that you can give out as well. So I'm very fortunate with my sobriety that I've been able to keep that going for 6 years, and
but you went sober before you became.
I did. Yeah. And I did that through a very well-known national organisation, which I won't mention.
Well, you can mention what you like, mate.
Well, it's part of it that you don't endorse it or whatever, but people will know what it's like, because it sounds like a very well-known road recovery group.
Yeah, that's fine. I get it.
And interestingly, part of that, going along to those meetings, introduced me to this notion of service. So service for the benefit of others. And, service in the benefit of others is about reducing that ego and stepping away from self.
But you already had that. You had the service element in you anyway. The fact that you've done the police route, you've done your stuff around the healthcare side, voluntary, paid, whatever it may be, you've got that service string in your bow, if you like,
to a certain extent. But for example, when I first went along to those meetings, I was sort of in at the start time and then out at the end,
right? And
then the more I got into it, it was like, well, actually, I'm going to turn up 20 minutes early and I'm going to help set up. I'm going to set up the room. I'm going to get the posters out, the promotional literature and stuff. I'm going to be available to welcome anyone new who walks in who may be feeling a little bit anxious.
Yeah.
If we need milk for the tea or whatever, or need a hand for the tea, or doing whatever, or taking part in reading out our group principles, or doing a reading or something like that, I'm going to do it.
Right, okay.
Because this isn't just for me. This is about a bigger picture.
Yep.
So that notion of service has really stood me in good stead in terms of coming into like the Buddhist world, because I won't go on about it. There's the notion of what's called the bodhisattva ideal, and a bodhisattva is somebody who has the opportunity to reach enlightenment, which is like the ultimate awakening that the Buddha achieved, but they choose not to, so that they can serve everyone else.
Right, I gotcha.
So it's it's a very sort of unselfish thing to do. So service is important within Buddhism, as is spiritual friendship. And so for me, I'm proactively involved with my local Sangha, as we call it, which is our local community. I'm not going to go on about what I do and don't do.
No.
Because that would fly in the face of
what you actually do.
Of stepping away from the ego. And there's a fine balance between rejoicing in our merits in what we do, and being sort of proud of the things that we do for people, and also you don't want to be. I don't want to come across as braggy. But
you're maintaining the modesty around the lifestyle. It's a lifestyle as opposed to a religion, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
Who's the operational head, if you want, for want of a better? Is there an iconic person that you look up to now, or is it
the Buddha? Mainly the Buddha. I mean, we say when you sort of deepen your practice, you say you're going for refuge, and you go for refuge to the three jewels, and the three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha is the idea of the awakened mind. The Dharma is the Buddha's teachings, which is the truth and the way how things really are, as opposed to how we perceive them. And the Sangha is like the spiritual community, so the people that are within it. And there is almost a supernatural Sangha as well. I said there wasn't a supernatural earlier, but there kind of is. But the Buddha essentially was a human. So,
how do you feel? Because we were watching I'm a Celebrity, and of course I think is Boy George a Buddhist?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he dare I say it, he didn't cover himself in a lot of glory in some of the stuff that he did there, but I wouldn't expect you to. But how there must be a number of famous people that have gone into Buddhism. How does that sit with the ego side? Because obviously they're getting up and performing, and when you get up and perform, there is an element of ego that gets involved with a performance.
Yeah, an interesting point, because one of the so there's a thing called the Four Noble Truths within Buddhism, and one of that they are that there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there's an end of suffering, and there's a way to the end of that suffering. And the way to the end of that suffering is the Eightfold Noble Path, and within that Eightfold Noble Path are 8 things, funnily enough, and such as right speech and so on. And one of those things is right livelihood. So one of the things that can never be considered as right livelihood within Buddhism is acting.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting that you raise that about Boy George, for example, because what is acting about? There can be a lot of.
Well, yeah, it's a performance, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
to be an actor, it's around performance. So, is Richard Gere Buddhist as well. I'm not sure. I might be quoting wrong names here, but there are a number of people in the entertainment world that have become Buddhists. Mm-hmm. So there is a bit of a paradox there. How do you find the acceptance around the vegan? Because the vegan world has escalated considerably over the past 5 years. Mm-hmm. How do you find that now? Do you think there's more accessibility to food, plant-based foods, etc.? We see it at Tesco's and Sainsbury's and what have you, and there's the independent cafes, but they're still at a premium. You're still paying a lot of money for plant-based foods.
Sure, yeah.
How do you feel as a vegan? I mean, I do eat meat, and every meat lover says, "Oh, I love animals." Well, I do love animals, but I eat meat as well. You know, and how would you convince me not to eat meat?
I wouldn't even attempt to.
Well, you're a kind man.
It's not for me to impart my views on you.
No. Okay. That's kind.
I could read you a poem that I wrote about veganism, and that might make you think twice about certain things.
No, I get it.
But maybe food for thought. Pardon the pun. But if you like animals that much, would you eat your own dog?
Well, no, exactly, and I do get that element of it as well. It's a healthy debate. But how do you find it, as an acceptance as being a vegan in 2022?
Yeah, acceptance-wise, in terms of other people's views on that, I have no view on it. Everyone's entitled to their views, and I don't proactively force it down anyone's neck that they should be vegan and should live plant-based. And that's kind of where my advocacy path kicks in quite nicely, because I'm able to say, these are the facts, these are the pros, these are the cons. You make your own mind up. Yeah, no, that's because I'm not in control of anyone.
Very diplomatically dealt with, sir.
But in terms of range of products out there, it is increasing. But you do pay a premium for it, and that is disappointing, because it is a healthier alternative, and yet people are priced out of making that healthier choice.
And it's ridiculous. I mean, we are, whilst we eat meat, we are big vegetable eaters as well. Mm-hmm. And vegetables are cheap. Then you don't have to spend a lot of money on a bag of carrots or broccoli or what. So for them to develop it in... This is a question I've got for you, right? So if... And this is a bit controversial, and I apologise, but why do they make vegan burgers and vegan sausages? Why do they make them, to look like chicken pieces? Why does that happen?
Why do you think that happens?
Well, it's marketing. I get that, but it's I'm asking the bloody questions here. but you can see the point I'm making. If it's that abhorrent, then why are they marketed and sold as being almost meat-like?
Yeah. Like, for example, like the Greggs sausage rolls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, if you've ever tried a vegan Greggs sausage rolls, they're delightful.
Are they?
Yeah, other brands are available.
But you recommend them?
Yeah, absolutely. Even meat eaters would say the same.
Yeah,
and would struggle to tell the difference.
We do eat plant-based stuff as well. So it's not we're not one-dimensional. But it is interesting that it is marketed in that particular way, when I suppose it's to draw more people into that way of life.
Yeah, I think so. And, food manufacturers are cottoning on to the fact that plant-based is a growth industry. And the way to attract more meat eaters into that is to make plant-based foods look like meat.
Right.
So that the mind is still seeing meat, but the taste buds are, and well, to a certain extent, the taste buds are tasting meat.
Yeah, they are.
But it hasn't got all the nasties in it, and isn't ruining the planet and so on.
So here's the debate: if we all ate vegetables, we wouldn't need we wouldn't see cows because we wouldn't have them, would we? You know, what or we'd have a surplus of cows. How does that work? I don't. You know, it's a question I haven't got an answer to.
Well, would we have a surplus of cows, or would we have? There's only a surplus of cows because we've bred them.
Yes, but if we didn't have them, what happens? What happens next?
There would be natural selection in terms of how they live.
Would we let them wander through the open lands?
Well, why not? It was humans who domesticated them in the first place.
Well, yeah, I accept that, but yeah, no, but it's an interesting debate, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like the guy that I interviewed who does the shooting. If it was explained to me once that if we didn't have paid for shoots, then we wouldn't have the amount of pheasants flying around because they introduce pheasants and partridges and so on and so forth. So. But it is an interesting debate. Richie, before we go any further, I'd like to say it's been brilliant. Oh, no, I've got one more question. What are you doing on Christmas Day? We're 4 days before Christmas. What are you doing Christmas Day?
Well, quite unconventionally, and compared to everyone else's Christmases, I'm choosing to go to the London Buddhist Centre in Hackney for the day. There's a day retreat, 10 till 4, and we'll bring a shared vegan lunch, so we'll bring something along, and it'll be a day of meditation, ritual, readings, and just nice, tranquil atmosphere, no festivities, trees or decorations. No,
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's all right. No King's Speech. I'm fortunate. I've got no pressing family matters this year, and respectful of that. Some other members of my family want to do their own thing, and like I say, I've recently become a mitra, so my commitment to the Buddhist way is deepened. And so I'm quite happy to go and do that, because largely a lot of people that celebrate Christmas, it's through conditioning. We're conditioned to think a certain way from a very young age, that this is what you got to do, this is the norm.
Yeah,
and there is another way.
Before we go any further, is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or change about today's interview?
No, I don't think so. No,
I've really enjoyed today, and I know that the listeners will as well. For somebody who said, I don't know what I've got to talk about, you've done bloody well, mate. So thank you very much. I don't know how to say it. I wish you all the peace in the world, and I hope you get everything that you need.
Thanks ever so much, Paul.
All right, mate.
Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers.